Welcome to this workshop of the Hopkins School Board. Special welcome to our community members who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. And it's a pleasure to be back with my board colleagues and Superintendent Mary Perry-Reed at the board table tonight. We have a relatively busy workshop agenda for this evening, so we'll dive right in with our first item, which is the Community Engagement and Learning Parameters Redesign Update. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you very much, Chair Bouchard, and greetings to all of our wonderful Hopkins School Board members and cabinet leaders, community members, and other folks listening in. Hi there, Abby. Dr. Holm. She's a doctor. Can you believe it? She's like 21 years old. Okay, Dr. Holm is actually going to help me out a little bit because we do have some data to provide to you, and I really learn a lot when I listen to Dr. Holm talk about the data. The data tells a story about what our community members desire and believe and want, and so we want you to have the data. But I will just start with some framing, and then we'll get to the data piece. And I do have to turn the slide deck on here. Okay, very good. Okay, so quite a few months ago, we began thinking about how we might follow a couple of the big recommendations that came from our 2018 Vision 2031 strategic task forces. And so we are calling this project Redesigning Learning Parameters, or Learning Redesign. Our partners in the work are Meredith Fox and Holly Craigthorpe. I hope I'm saying her name correctly, from Portage Partners. And they have really shouldered a lot of the research and the kind of building the infrastructure work for us so that we could engage in a seamless experience with you all and with our community. So, and I know that our board members have received some of this information before, but just in case there are parents or students or community members listening in, then we want to provide a kind of a comprehensive review of the process that we've followed. So bear with me if you've heard this before. Hello there. So again, based on these recommendations, and we had over 250 participants on our 2018 task forces, one of the recommendations was around the school year calendar. Task force recommended a more equitable calendar that recognized the religious and spiritual diversity of all of our stakeholders in the district, as well as asking us to think of a more creative and responsive school year model. So that's where the idea of a year-long elementary school came from. Another task force recommended moving ninth graders to our high school, and we understand that in years past, we have had conversations about moving sixth graders to a middle school model. At the same time, moving ninth graders, and so we wanted to couple those conversations because space might require that we do both. There was also a recommendation from a task force around creating learning opportunities outside of and beyond school walls. So think hybrid and online learning, outdoor immersion, and then a recommendation that we swap school start times. So have elementary students start earlier and pay attention to the biological, biorhythmic sleep patterns in our older students to have school start times be later for junior high and senior high kids. So these recommendations come directly from our community, and we wanted to put together a process to gather additional feedback on each of these pieces. We segmented the project into 3 parts. So the first part was just a process to design the whole, the whole effort, along with some research collection, looking at lots of articles and data that would inform our thinking. We then put together stakeholder engagement sessions and a very comprehensive survey. And we are now in phase 3, where we have a small team engaging in feasibility studies to look at what are the potential impacts if we make some different decisions that are system-wide and meant to be long-term. Then what are the different impacts that we would anticipate, good or challenging? So we're in the phase right now where we're looking at all of our data, survey, input from the folks who attended the engagement sessions, and now we're here with you at the second of 3 updates so that our school board can be really involved and help us make a decision or a set of decisions that will serve our students well. So here are some of our folks who served on the subcommittees, 1 subcommittee per big topic. And the purpose of the committee was twofold, really. Number 1, vetting the research, looking at the articles and just trying to make sure that there's some, balanced pieces out there offering multiple perspectives, and then also identifying some scenarios or some models that our community members could contemplate when they attended the engagement sessions. Okay, here's just a summary of how many attendees we had at our 4 engagement sessions. 2 were in person, 2 were virtual. We had lots and lots of parents, quite a few staff, not as many students as we wanted, but if I was wearing socks, they would have come off when I saw that over 1,500 students completed the survey. Remember when all the student board reps were like, you got to get it out there, right? And so we had our clerks in our schools put the QR code on big posters for students to, capture with their phones, maybe on the way to lunch. So, I don't know all the tactics that were used to get the survey out there, but I was astounded. And Dr. Holm does make sure that we don't have, a student taking it like 25 times. So she looks for the duplicates or, whatever that's called.
I mean, adults can do that too, so that's not just students.
Oh, yeah, true. Oh. Well, anyway, that was just phenomenal to see. I was really pleased with that. So I am grateful for our student board reps who, really pushed us to think of creative ways of getting that survey in front of our students. And thanks to Dr. Holm also, she's done a lot of work to engage with students, to engage with our families of color, to engage in some smart tactics to get people to participate and provide their input. And then Actually, Elise, we're going to have Dr. Holm present soon. Will she be able to? She'll just. Okay. Did we have a problem last time with someone speaking and?
I can't remember.
She'll be okay.
We have to do one or the other, but I can switch back and forth.
We have to do, yeah, didn't we have a problem last time with me presenting and somebody speaking?
Yeah.
Okay, so I might have to, so she can present, how about that? Sorry, okay, I'm just trying to ready for that. So we do have a collection of folks who are sort of our, I don't know, ad hoc recommendation task force team, just to look at all of this information and make sure that the recommendations we're providing to the school board are reasonable, reflect community input. And so we're looking at a lot of this information to put together the recommendations for you. And you can see that it includes all of the community engagement sessions, the survey data, the research, the scenario planning, and then the feasibility pieces, which we don't have for you today. We will have that feasibility work is being done right now, and so we can send the results to you as board members ahead of the November 23rd meeting, but it's at the November 23rd meeting where we'll dive into what the feasibility analysis suggests. So I think this is where, Dr. Holm, I think you're going to start with this slide. So we have some data pieces that she'll explain, and then I'll come back and we'll go over the recommendations.
Awesome. So Elise, do you want me to present now then?
Elise?
Try not to echo here. Abby, if you want me to present your slide, if you just want to reshare that with me.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, and then we're starting on slide 7.
Correct.
All right, I think we are good to go. So as Dr. Mary Perry Reed mentioned, we did a couple of different tactics to collect data. So we took a mixed methods approach. And so first we're going to review some of the themes that arose from the qualitative data. And then we'll talk about the survey responses that came, and that's our quantitative data. So on this slide, we've depicted, the consistent themes that emerged across the 4 topics. So I'll kind of give you a background as to what we did to gather these themes. So at each one of our stakeholder listening sessions, we got into 4 different groups, and depending on the topic. So if you're interested in start times, you went to the start times group. If you're interested in grade configurations, you went to the grade configurations group. And a administrator, staff member, and a student attended each one of these groups to take notes. And so the notes, which ranged from, quotations verbatim from the sessions or just general themes that were coming out of the sessions, those were our qualitative data. Okay, and so we had over 550 pieces of qualitative data that emerged from the 4 different sessions on the 4 different nights. And then we also had, in addition to the sessions, we had a open-ended form on the website where people could share their thoughts on one of the 4 topics or all 4 topics if they'd like. So once we had the data, we engaged in some thematic analysis. And what that is it's just sifting through the data and coding it into certain themes that appear to come up regularly throughout the data. So we can see kind of on the left here are our more positive themes. So we have themes like easing family burden. A lot of families, staff members, and students said, some of these changes could ease some of the family burdens that come with the current structure of schools. Another theme that came up is that these changes could provide more choice for our scholars. Many people saw an academic benefit to the changes being proposed. There was a staff benefit. So a lot of people said, something like start times or non-traditional spaces or places could benefit staff. And then another consistent theme that came up was scholar health and wellness. So people generally felt that some of these changes would improve scholar health and wellness. While we had lots of positive feedback arise from the stakeholder listening sessions and from the open-ended form submission on the website, there were also some concerns. Some people felt that, while the changes could ease some families' burdens, whether that's childcare or transportation, they worried about, would some of the changes burden families? There was also a concern for academics. So, would we get the same level of rigor, or how would the adjustment work for our kids if, we moved to outdoor start times or outdoor learning or changed start times? There was some concern for scholar development that was particularly around our grade configurations. So is 6th grade an appropriate place, or is elementary or junior high an appropriate place for 6th graders? How does that tie into development? There was some concern for staff. Would this add to staff's workload? And then there was an overarching theme that said, I just want to know more. I want to know more about what we're thinking and what this might look like. So that was the thematic analysis. So that is the qualitative data. At this point, I'll move to the quantitative data. So move to the next slide. So first on this slide, we can see our survey participants. So we had over 4,000 responses to the survey. And as we mentioned, 1,500 of those were our students. And then we had about 2,000 caregivers respond and about 500 staff members respond. We also are making a concerted effort to understand how our survey demographics reflect that of our community demographics. So in the past, we tend to see that we hear more from our white families or from more of our affluent families in surveys. And so we're thinking as a district as to how we can get a more representative sample of people responding to surveys. So we did a couple things to increase our representation there. But what I did is I did a number of analysis tools to also help us to get a representative sample of data. So the data that I'm presenting here is representative. We employed a number of steps to ensure that the data we're reviewing is representative. So pretty close here, you can see about 45% of those who responded were white, 8% were 2 or more races, 18% were Black or African American. It looks like about 3% were Asian American, 7% were Hispanic or Latinx, and then 17%, actually a fair amount of our families didn't or preferred not to answer with their regard to their race ethnicity. So from here, we can jump into the topics. The first topic was year-round school. So this is everyone. So everyone who responded, and then from that representative sample, here were the responses. So you can see it looks like about 40% very much or somewhat supported one of our elementary schools being a year-round school. About 20% were undecided, and about 40% said they were not really interested or not at all. A lot of things that came up with this question were often families or students or staff would say, you know, I really could see how this would work out for some families and how this would benefit some scholars. I just don't want that for myself. So it wasn't necessarily that we were opposed to the whole system. Making one of our elementary schools, it just, the personal interest wasn't as strong. Can go to the next slide. In regards to non-traditional spaces and places, in terms of our high school courses, we asked, do you believe some high school courses should be permanently taught online or in a hybrid format? People were pretty undecided here. You can see about 50% said maybe, I just don't know. 24% said yes, and 28% said no. So not as conclusive in terms of the data here. We asked, would you facilitate regularly scheduled and or frequent outdoor experiences for your students if you had the right support? Now, one thing that's important to note here is that this question went to just our educators. So you can see here, 57% said yes, I would facilitate it if I had the right support. 30%-ish were on the fence, said maybe, and then about 15% said no, I wouldn't like to facilitate that. And then one other thing I should mention here is we asked about the high school courses that went to our secondary families. So families or staff or scholars who were affiliated with either the junior high schools or the high school were able to see that high school courses question. But since it was relevant to those families and not necessarily elementary families, we only showed it to the secondary families just to keep the survey as short as we could, knowing that we were taking some of our, that the survey was taking some of our community members' time. Okay, so this slide depicts 3 different charts on start times. So first, we asked, would you support a 22 to 23 implementation to later secondary start and end times? You can see about a little over 60% said that they would very much or somewhat support that. 13% were undecided, and about 25% said, I don't really support that, or I don't at all support that. We asked as an elementary educator, so this question just went to our elementary educators, would you support elementary school starting and ending earlier in the day? You can see here about 65% said, yep, I very much or somewhat would support that. About 10% were undecided. And again, about 28 or 30% said, I don't really support that, or I don't at all support that. And then we asked, would you as a secondary educator support secondary school beginning and ending later in the day? You can see there's a bit more support there. About 70% said they would very much or somewhat support that. 10% were undecided, and the remaining said not really or not at all. So then I'll move to my last segment. So that's grade configurations. It's really important to note the wording here. So 3 different graphs depict the questions we asked. First, we asked, would you support keeping 6th graders at the elementary schools if it results in a 7-8 middle school model? You can see that, let's see, about 60% said, yep, I'm I'm good with keeping sixth graders there. 20% were undecided, and the remaining 23-ish% said, no, I don't support keeping sixth graders at the elementary schools. Then we asked, would you support moving ninth graders to the high school if it results in a 7-8 middle school model? Again, you can see about a 60% say, very much or somewhat. 15% were undecided there, and the remaining 25% said, no, I don't support moving ninth graders. And then we asked, if you are interested in moving ninth graders to the high school, would you support this change in 22-23? So you can see that almost half say, yes, I support doing this next year. 25% say maybe, 12% say, no, I think it needs to be a little bit later. And then 20% said, no, I just don't support that change. So that is a lot of data. I can stick around to answer any questions, but also you can just turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holm. Really appreciate your partnership with the presentation. I do want to just create a moment if board members have specific questions about the data to clarify your understanding of the data.
Dr. Holm, do you have numbers on how many staff members completed the survey?
Yep, so it was about 500. I can get you the exact numbers if you're curious as well.
And I'm curious about if they were secondary educators or elementary educators.
So 533 total, but Abby, I'm not sure if you can discern number of elementary versus secondary.
Yeah, it is a little trickier to do that only because, we knew that we'd be asking our community members to take time out of their day to take the survey. So when we set up the survey, we asked, what school or site are you affiliated with? At what schools or sites? So they could select all that applied. So like if a secondary educator had a child in elementary, then they could select more than one school. So that was definitely a learning. On one hand, we liked that they could select as many as they could, but it is harder to disaggregate the data in that way. Let me pull up some of the data here. It looks like it's about half and half.
Okay, thank you.
Slightly more elementary. So if we're just assuming that, people who shared, which is true, people who shared that they were affiliated with the high school, more often than not, they didn't share that they were affiliated with any other schools. It looks like there was slightly more elementary feedback than secondary.
Okay, thank you.
I'd be curious too, on any of the questions, if there was a big difference between the way that the students responded versus the staff versus parents. If there were any questions that we asked where, because we maybe had more caregivers answering than staff, was there a big discrepancy between how they answered?
There weren't huge discrepancies. One thing that we did look at is we looked at, if we were just to look at our families of color, did they differ in their discrepancies? Did they differ at all from, the general sample that we heard from? And I can tell you that the families of color were less excited about some of the changes. So, for example, keeping sixth graders, families of color were generally less excited about that, just slightly. And then the start times, there was slightly less interest in that from our families of color. In terms of students seem to be pretty into the start times changing. Students differed a little bit with the grade configurations, but not super So there weren't any drastic differences, I guess is a good way to summarize it, but there were some slight differences. So for example, if we look at grade configurations, let's see, just looking at this data in real time. Slightly, so we can see about 45% of our students supported moving ninth graders and keeping sixth graders. When we look at everyone who responded, that is closer to about 57 or 60, 50, 55 to 60%. So 55 to 60% of our community said, yep, keep sixth graders, move ninth graders, but that's closer to about 45 for our students. So that I think is the biggest discrepancy that I saw amongst the data between students and the rest of the community.
And Abby, was there a difference like that between staff and parent support of keeping sixth graders, moving ninth graders? I thought that parents favored keeping sixth graders in elementary at a slightly higher percentage level than staff.
Yep. So if I just look at Hopkins parents, we can see 68% said, yep, I want to keep the sixth graders at the elementary school, compared to the 55% of everyone. Mm-hmm. And then about the same pattern, slightly less, about 60% say they support moving ninth graders. And that's compared to, again, about the 55 to 60%. So not a huge difference with ninth graders. There seems to be a little bit more of a disparity with moving sixth graders, where more parents and caregivers were in support of keeping sixth graders at the elementary compared to, say, staff or students.
Chair Bouchard,
Yes, Director Adams.
I'd just like to thank the administration for taking the time to do this so that we know specifically how our constituency feels about this. The last time we went through this, there were only 2 feedback venues. They were both public hearings, and they did not, in my opinion, reflect the whole of the stakeholders. So I really have to thank you for conducting this, getting some solid data, and it's certainly going to help guide our decision on this whole process.
I agree with that. It's been a very holistic process.
Total team effort, so really appreciate the entire team involved. Dr. Holm, I know we're putting together a plan for providing a comprehensive report of the data to our parents. Do we know a little bit about what that's going to look like or the delivery date?
I would really like to get it delivered in the next week. The data are ready. It's just making sure that we're thoughtful about how we're communicating and ensuring that everyone can reach and access the reporting.
Okay.
So I think about in the next week, we can expect to see those roll out for staff and our families and students as well.
Okay.
I
Well, thanks.
just had a quick question about the year-round school. If there's any kind of deeper information we could get around that. I find it interesting that it seems like we're pretty much as a community evenly split, but I'd be interested in who sees the value in that and why, and I'm not sure if we can get to that, but I found it very interesting when we were talking about which groups responded which way, and wondering if it's maybe an education piece that perhaps our people outside of kind of the education field don't really know what that means, or Like I can see parents with kids with special needs really responding favorably to that. Were they well represented in the data? Just wondering if we can get a deeper dive on that would be great.
Do we have the qualitative data to begin to answer that question, or do we, I mean, our recommendation is that we take another year to look at that model and dive deeper into what the model could look like and what families would love or be concerned about it. But do we have any preliminary data that answers this question?
Yeah, so I did a less robust thematic analysis on the qualitative data we received in the survey. And one of the main things that came up in support, or I'll say a couple things came up when people were in support of a year-round school. One was the immersion. So people really liked the idea of people who were in favor of the year-round school said, you know, this could be really good for immersion. I think families who have kids receiving special services, yeah, I think that was also a theme, but also families who were homeless or highly mobile. That was some of the research that emerged. Now, there weren't people that said, you know, this would benefit me directly, but that was a theme that people would share. I could see how this could really support the families in these communities. The main concerns were people really like their summers. And so a lot of the qualitative feedback was, you know, we want to be able to take our summer trips. And so I do think that some of it could be around, you know, what does that even look like? What, you know, maybe there needs to be more education as to here's what the model might entail and here's what the summer might look like. But yeah, I would say the main concerns were around summer and getting that time with family or extracurriculars.
Great, thank you.
Chair Bouchard.
Sure, Director Cool.
I have a follow-up question on that specifically. So when we're thinking about a year-round school, understanding that people may have been answering the question that it would be good for them, or they were thinking of somebody else, does it ever make sense, even keeping in mind that we're going to possibly wait a year to find more information, does it make sense to put the question out at some point to parents, if we had a year-round school next year, would you sign your child up for it? So you can get a real number of what that would be. Would it be 100? Or would it be 500? Because I feel like we had a similar situation with the online academy
Yes.
where we thought, oh, you know what, there's going to be some families, then all of a sudden you're hiring 35 people.
Well, we did survey our parents. If we offered an online academy, would you sign up for it? And that's how we started to get our preliminary data. So that's good thinking. So I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
We need to do that, and the question is when. When is the right time? Okay, is it okay to let Dr. Holm go?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Holm, and presenting the data. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for bearing with the information. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay, so board members, we just have 4 more slides. So we're transitioning to the recommendations portion of this presentation to give you an idea of where our thinking is based on all of this data. Please keep in mind that we're not yet we have not yet completed the feasibility studies, and so we'll have a lot more information for you in the next 2 weeks. So regarding the year-round school calendar, we talked about how there is emerging interest in a year-round elementary school model, lots of questions about how it would work. We did hear from many families, oh, please don't consider doing this district-wide, right? So they were thinking, you know, is this going to be a district-wide approach, or like how many schools? Is it going to be at the high schools? Like, no, just one elementary school. So lots of concern about us kind of going rogue and, you know, having every school be year-round. And then just emerging understanding, we just talked about it, that a year-round experience could help students in some specific categories strengthen their learning. So our recommendation for this topic is that we use school year 22-23 to continue intentionally exploring what a year-round elementary school might look like in Hopkins, with probably the intention to pilot at one site. But, you know, there's a lot involved in that, in addition to studying the model, visiting some schools, identifying a perfect school, making sure the school leader and staff are on board. You know, there's a lot that goes into that, which is why it would be smart for us to take a year to continue exploring, but in a purposeful and intentional way. So I'll go to the second topic here, which is extending learning beyond our current traditional spaces and places. You heard from the data that there's a lot of support for increased outdoor learning opportunities at the elementary level. There is mixed support for hybrid and online learning options. And of course, we do have a subset of families who would like to continue their current online learning experiences in our online academy. But there's clearly a preference for in-person learning with a majority of our stakeholders. So our recommendation to you is that we use the 22-23 school year, similar to the year-round recommendation, to explore creating a school-wide elementary outdoor immersion program. We believe Gatewood Elementary would be the perfect school to do this work, but again, you know, we have been building a culture in Hopkins where we don't tell people what to do. We work with people, we partner with our staff, with our leaders, with our families, so that there's a great deal of consensus and support around an idea before it gets launched. So we need a year to figure that out. We would continue offering our online academy, virtual EDU. Hopefully you read your recent board update to interested students, both residents, and then once we get fully accredited, then we would potentially accept out-of-district students. And then we do recommend that you ask us to specifically identify high school courses that should be permanently offered in hybrid or online format. We know that some courses and some students really work best in that fashion, and we want to be intentional with which courses, which students. So for our third topic, which is start times, school start times, you saw in the data that there is strong support for starting elementary earlier, starting junior high and high school later. One piece of feedback that we've received really since last year is please don't use the word secondary in your communication. Some families don't know what secondary means, especially because we're not referring to elementary as primary. So we've been trying to train ourselves to change our language to say junior high and high school instead of secondary. But strong support for flipping or swapping or, you know, whatever word you'd like to use. Research does show that adjusting those start times in those ways would be developmentally appropriate for both groups. I do want our board and community to understand that there was a lot of conversation around acknowledging that the sleep patterns of sixth graders would probably be more akin to the sleep patterns of older students, not K-5 students. So that's and you'll see the 6th grade dilemma show up momentarily. So our recommendation is that our school board approves adjusting elementary and junior high. Look at, I use that word secondary in the screen. Not following my own advice. Wow. Okay. It's a
right? It's a
process.
process.
Yeah, you have to do it like 25 times. Approving adjusting elementary, as well as junior high and high school start times beginning this next school year, so school year 22-23, such that elementary students start earlier and junior high or middle school and senior high students start later. Now, we are still assessing the feasibility pieces, so we'll share those results with you. We know it will work because, you know, we're in the Lake Conference. All the other schools in our conference do it. You know, we're one of the final ones to make this change. So we know it'll work, but we do want to assess specific impact on those programs that you see on the screen: transportation, before and after care, school nutrition, athletics activities, including middle school athletics activities. And then just, you know, we do have to decide when we're going to implement specific changes. So we may, you know, decide that we can't move 9th graders and do start times at the same time, but let's dig into that in this last slide here. So for the 4th topic, grade configurations, we did review the data that families are concerned about moving 6th graders to a 6-8 model. However, families generally support moving 9th graders to our high school. Staff and students highly support moving 9th graders to our high school. And one interesting pattern that we've identified in speaking with our school leaders that we believe is important for our school board and community to understand is our elementary principals do believe that 6th graders can rise to the challenge and probably, most likely, belong in a middle school model. Their bodies are bigger. They are maturing into sort of that middle school developmental age space. They think differently than 4th and 5th graders. 6th grade teachers think and operate differently than, you know, teachers of 4th and 5th graders. Elementary leaders believe that if the support is strong and if the environment is nurturing, that our 6th graders need to be challenged in greater ways and that they would be able to rise to the occasion in, you know, in that perfect 6-8 experience. So I think that's really important for us to take a look at. It does provide a complicating piece because, you know, not all of our teachers have said they support this, and of course our families, you know, just really, many of our families really like the idea of keeping our kids longer in the elementary model. Our junior high and senior high school leaders expressed that they really love their 9th graders, like they would never want to lose them, and they believe that, you know what, it's probably time to like get with the rest of the world and provide our 9th graders with a freshman experience, as long as the freshman experience is strong, nurturing, high quality. We don't have kids falling through the cracks, right? So we would have to be really thoughtful about what the transition looks like, as well as what the freshman year experience looks like. We have a couple of leaders who worked in districts. They, you know, we have our principal, Aroma Sally, worked at a high school that received 9th graders for the first time, and he said it took almost 4 years for that transition to just feel like it was the right thing. So we know that the transition will be challenging in multiple ways. And it can be wonderful in multiple ways as well. So our, I said potential recommendation because we, leadership believes that we do need to take a careful look at the feasibility information as it would inform this specific recommendation. So what could be possible is phasing some ninth graders, so for example, 50 or 100 ninth graders to the high school for the 22-23 school year, and freshmen and teachers work together to design the transition experience as well as create what that freshman year experience could look like. We think that to just transfer all 500 freshmen to the high school right away this fall would be too much for a system. We don't know if we would be able to get ourselves ready for all of those freshmen right away and guarantee a solid experience. You know, maybe we could if we really pushed ourselves, but this would be a lot of change, changing start times and moving ninth graders, especially when we're not quite sure what to do with sixth graders. Now, the piece with sixth graders is that what we talked about with our leaders is that if we have an enrollment growth strategy and we're fairly confident that over time we'll gain more preschoolers and kindergartners and our elementary buildings will be very full, then we do have to figure out where our sixth graders should be. And then, you know, couple that with the strong, I would say, expertise of our elementary leaders. Do we need to think about transitioning our sixth graders, but how do we do it in a phased approach? So we have a lot of thinking to do, actually, in the next 2 weeks, just looking at the feasibility pieces, and then timing will be an issue. So this recommendation will be much more solid hopefully be much more solid the next time that we meet. You know, it's not going to hurt to take another year to look at what a high-quality transition will look like, whether it's for a subset of students or for, you know, the whole class. There is not a ton of support amongst our leaders for having just 7th and 8th graders at a school. So, Dr. Lightfoot, is there anything that you would add to this? I feel like this grade configurations topic is our most complicated topic, and we're trying to give you as much detail as possible without being super complex or overwhelming. Anything else that you can add? Any patterns or salient points?
Most of them, I think, you know, sometimes facility questions come up and we'll be exploring those as well.
The what questions?
Facility questions?
Oh, facility, yes, yes. I thought you said silly questions.
Well, those come up too.
Yeah, those two. Yeah, lots of what about IB questions? Lots of, well, how many students can the high school hold? You know, and my thing is, as a system leader, gosh, I don't feel like I would be doing my job to ensure that we have innovative programming for our students if we transition the freshmen and we just keep the seniors and everybody does their schooling between 8:30 and 3 o'clock, and you know, we haven't really changed the experience. So for example, I believe that if we're going to move freshmen, then not only do we create space by doing something different with our seniors, but our seniors need to be engaged in internships, job shadowing, experiences that are aligned with their college and career post-high school placements. We should not, we need to create a unique and career and college aligned experience for our 12th graders. And a bulk of their learning has got to be beyond the school walls. So we would need time to design and develop that. But if they're out and about and they're, you know, job shadowing and interning, and then there's also space for our freshmen. So there's a lot of work we have to do with this. So I think it's almost 6, so maybe are there any questions that you have as board members? And then this is the last slide.
Well, I'll just say, I'm not too concerned about capacity, facility capacity, because we've had a lot more kids at the high school before than we currently have now. So I don't know what the high water mark was, but I think it was about 50% more than what we've got there right now. So I'm sure we can find the capacity. I would also ask that in addition to all the other considerations, that budgetary issues be addressed too, which I would assume they are, but as a treasurer, I have to ask that. So, yeah, because I'm sure there will be a cost impact, specifically for changing start times. I think that's where we'll see more of the budgetary impact. So if you could do some what-ifs on that, I'd
Maybe.
appreciate it.
If it's still 3 tiers, it might be like, a net zero. However, the elementary leaders would like to have all elementary schools start at the same time. And then when we ask the same question of our junior high and high school leaders, they said because there are many staff that travel across sites, itinerant staff, so it'd be helpful for those staff and probably helpful for just the consistency of the experience if you have kids at junior high and high school for the start end times and maybe even the bell schedule to be the same. But then our high school principal said, well, what if the high school start and end time or bell course schedule time was different so that there was a period during the day where high schoolers could partner with junior high middle school students and do peer tutoring or teaching or coaching or mentoring. So there's so many opportunities to do things differently in a way that would serve our students well, and we just have to be thoughtful. So yeah, if we go to two tiers of transportation,
Yeah.
then
Well,
what would
know
be the
last
cost?
time, there were 3 different tier strategies that were evaluated, and they all had a different cost associated with them. So I'd like to know what those are.
I'm thinking through process. I know we have community members tuning in tonight to listen to this discussion, and then, of course, we'll, I anticipate, have a lot of community involvement on the 23rd. And so I was happy to hear that Dr. Holmes' team is putting together the data in a way that, that can be presented to our community so everyone can see that before the 23rd. I have had quite a few questions around the feasibility studies, and wondering if there's a way to share some of the top line items from the feasibility studies with our community before we as a board vote on this on the 23rd so that we can hear community input around the feasibility pieces.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the calendar here.
Chair Bouchard. So
So maybe in principal newsletters, for example, on Friday, November 19. Yeah, well, that'll be a question for Pam Carmen, so we'll have to just find out what kind of she's, setting aside all other projects to focus on this right now. I don't know, however, the timeline for work completion, so we can check in with her and maybe get back to you.
Sure, thank you. Director Cool had a comment or question.
Yeah, just a quick question. So, Director Adams, you had thought that at one time enrollment was maybe even double. So have we, even if it's like 20% more, that would cover it, but have we, I'm assuming, Dr. Mary Perry-Reed, your team within the feasibility study is looking at, have we changed, knowing that we've opened up a lot of classrooms and made some changes to have more of an open format, does that cause any issues with being able to fit more students? I'm assuming all of that is being taken into account.
Yeah, we're doing a walkthrough to compare what currently is with what our blueprints say, and our blueprints haven't yet been modified to reflect the recent renovations.
Got it. Awesome. And that will be done by the next
That
meeting.
that should be done. Mhm.
I just wanted to quick comment on one of the things that you were talking about being innovative about this change. And I think that one of the things that's exciting is having had a senior who went through their senior year during the pandemic. It really allowed our scholar to stay connected to Hopkins High School while also pursuing learning opportunities at the University of Minnesota. And so that transition was really a good one. And I think traditionally, students usually have to choose which place they want to be. Do they want to stay at their high school and stay connected to their home district, or do they want to go to whichever college they're enrolled in for PSEO? And I think that finding a way to have that kind of hybrid situation is really a great thing that we can do for our students, because that's where the relationships exist with staff, with peers. And so having both in as part of their senior experience, I think would be really, really good.
Kind of like having a foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a really nice transition to now going to the U for full-time. So just, I think that being innovative around what that senior year could look like for our students is a great way to be focused right now.
What grade are you in, and what do you think?
I'm in 10th grade.
Okay.
Could you clarify more? I mean, we kind of talked about a lot so
Yeah.
far.
Well, maybe could you offer two thoughts? One, what do you think would have been a wonderful freshman year experience? Would you have preferred to stay at the junior high, or would you have welcomed starting freshman year at the high school? And what should that freshman year experience look like? And maybe you might be too young to answer, like, what should senior year look like? But if you have any thoughts about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure freshman year I did distance up until the point where you could start going in person. And I think, first of all, the way that we transitioned from everybody from distance to in person was a great way of doing it, from the like one day to every other, and then slowly integrating them more. I think as far as a freshman experience goes, it wasn't a super huge change between having it what would have been in 9th grade versus basically having it this year. Because it's, I guess what I would view the freshman experience as is more or less like being in a new school again and kind of, you know, meeting kids that are older than you and doing all of that, very similar to what like the 7th grade experience was for a lot of kids, because it's that same like system of steps. So I know to me and a couple other kids that I've talked to about this, just in passing, that we didn't really feel like we were missing out on a whole lot with starting 9th and 10th. I mean, we didn't feel like it was this huge thing that every other school was doing that we really weren't, especially because we're still having those experiences just this year instead of last.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. A lot for us to consider, and we'll look forward to the conversation on November 23rd. We are going to take a short break now until 6:15, and then we'll come back and finish our workshop agenda. Thank you. Okay, we'll resume our workshop, and I'd like to invite Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to the table. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, our data privacy policy and practice update, and I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Just a little bit of background, which I think Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot will also talk about, is we were reviewing a policy at one of our policy committee meetings, and the question around data breaches and privacy-related issues came up. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to speak more in depth around those issues. I know that it's a topic of concern within our community. So thank you for giving us some more details.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question and the opportunity to provide a background set of information. So taking that lead from the monitoring committee, we connected Director Chapanduka, Director Wetter, and myself on what we thought might be helpful for the board to have as kind of a basic level of understanding of the way in which we ensure for some of the risks in a general sense, as well as the specific nature of what we do when it comes to cybersecurity, especially knowing in the heightened era in which we live and the need for security practices, how we work to manage that risk we thought would be of benefit and helpful background information. So we have a presentation this evening that should take you through that. Director Chapanduka, I believe, is on as well. And Director Chapanduka, I think we were going to have, Lisa, are you going to present?
Is it his slide or is it?
Correct.
The career survey?
Yep.
Happy to.
Thank you. And then once that's ready to show and present, we should be ready to go.
Great, thank you.
Great. And the next slide is the purpose, and went through briefly with the purpose, and then Director Chapanduka, I believe you're up next.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lightfoot. Alice, if you can go to the previous slide, please. Okay, so as alluded to by Dr. Lightfoot, the whole idea is to give the board and the community a brief overview of our general insurance coverages, our pool of school districts who actually make up the Alliance for Liability and Property Services, as well as some of the general coverages we have to undertake as a school district to protect us from all kinds of risk situations. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the district belongs to the Alliance for Liability and Property Services. And this group actually was incepted in July of 2014, and Hopkins being one of the actual original members to the group. So the total claims you see actually comprise of all the districts which actually belong to this group, and I'll actually give you more details on the school districts which actually participate in the Alliance for Liability and Property Services. And we decided to go as a consortium just because we saw the advantage of coming together and act as one family in regards to premiums and competition in the insurance industry. Can you go to the next slide? So currently we have 7 members to the ALPS. This include Rosemont Apple Valley, again, Public Schools, which is district number 196, Stillwater Area Public Schools, Hopkins Public Schools, Minnetonka Public Schools, Mount View Public Schools, Rochester Public Schools, and St. Cloud Public Schools. As most of you know, how the market has been playing. We're actually in the 3rd year of a middle to a hard market. Just knowing with what happened last year in the Twin Cities, as well as what you've been hearing in the news with cybersecurity and ransomware, and some of the natural catastrophic damages which have happened in the market. It's been a tough process to actually get insurance competitively. But again, due to the fact that we belong to this consortium, we've been able to manage some of the risk components through our brokerage, which is Gallagher and Bassett. What we've seen actually in the last 3 years, we've seen that property market has seen an increase due to weather conditions, some of the hurricanes which have happened, and some of the Midwest severe storms and events in states like Texas with the snow and cold weather which happened last year, which caused damages to the tune of 15 billion. We've also seen that interest rates have remained historically low. There's also a rising trends in liability lines, including employment practice liability. We've seen, based on market conditions, that there's been judgments, especially in the education sector, which is favoring the plaintiff. So there's always higher liability for insurance companies, which is forcing most of insurance players not to want to risk their portfolios in the public sector, mostly in education. There's also been increases in school board legal and cyber risks. And this means that most of the market carriers are more risk averse when it comes to underwriting. On the property front, most of the properties kind of seen skyrocketing due to some of the conditions mostly caused by social interactions in the last 2 years. Loss trends also have been rising, putting most carriers under distress. And we've seen in the last 2 years that our insurance actually almost doubled from a premium standpoint. Again, when we also look at natural disasters, this has also been forcing a lot of insurance companies to think twice. Can you go to the next one? As I mentioned earlier on, that there are 7 members to the consortium with a total student count of about 98,833, which is a slight decrease in comparison to fiscal year 21. With total vehicles of 515, which is a 3% increase from the previous year. And our total insured values, including vehicles, is $4,147,585,288. which is 6% increase in comparison to the previous year. Again, just across the market, there's been increase in school board legal challenges. Again, in areas of special education, and this is kind of causing a lot of carriers to actually be very mindful of education, and in turn leading us to have fewer players on the market, and it becomes less competitive. We also have had more increase in liabilities in the auto area, mostly with distracted drivers, and also, bus accidents. Same thing with our pollution liabilities, and this is just across the industry, not specifically to Hopkins, but the market conditions actually forces and determines what our premiums look like. The next slide actually jumps into cybersecurity, which is part of the discussion we are having here. And I'll have Director John Wetter give us more context to the cybersecurity. But as you all may know, there's been a lot of vulnerabilities in the public education sector. And this has actually made most insurance companies really avoid providing these services. I know there was the blackboard last year, which actually affected a lot of the higher education entities. And cyber companies and cyber carriers have been actually more pushing for ways to actually be more preventative when it comes to cyber, including phishing training, multi-factor authentication, as well as how we actually store and backup records. And I know John will provide more context to this. Can you go to the next slide, please? So currently, we are actually insured with Lloyd's of London, and our cyber limit is $2 million. And the deductibles depends with the size of the district, starting with a minimum of 50,000 to a maximum of 100,000. We are actually in the middle. One of the conditions which has been brought by our cyber carrier is multi-factor authentication, which we have implemented as a district, and Mr. Wetter will provide more information on that. Actually, this is a snippet of a real life situation which happened in Broward County. That's why you see that it's important for us to safeguard our systems, because Broward County School District was attacked by ransomware, and they had to actually get into a situation where they ended up having to make some losses because their information was compromised, and they were not able to access it, and the attackers demanded $40 million for them to be able to get their files back. And this has been happening in a lot of public education spheres, and we've been very vigilant on making sure that at Hopkins Public Schools, our systems are guarded, and we have the best controls in place in safeguarding the privacy of our information. I will have Mr. Wetter give us some more details in as far as what we are doing as a district in mitigating some of the cybersecurity concerns in the industry.
Thank you, Director Chapanduka. Taking a look at some of the pieces both that ELPS is doing with us, is some of these requirements that we're starting to see come through. And so these list some of the specific requirements that we're looking at, of which Hopkins has implemented. And certainly some of these are new, some of these are we've been doing for, excuse me, for a long time. And so these are from the insurance-specific pieces that we're looking at, the factors in keeping our information secure. And so to the next slide, just to do a little bit of kind of touching base here, is first of all wanting to make sure that we understand that both while privacy and security are intrinsically linked, they are different things. And so making sure that we're understanding around that privacy really being your own data and who you're willing to give it that data to. And so in this case, it would be if you're giving data to the school district, you're essentially giving up some of that privacy because you are giving some of that information about yourself or about your student. And then it's the responsibility of the school district to keep that data secure. So the security of that private information, making sure that while it's available, it's also being kept secure. So just wanting to make sure that we're talking about those two pieces, although intrinsically linked, as I mentioned, they are two separate items. Some of the challenges, certainly as Director Chapanduka has been mentioning as well from the insurance front, we certainly are seeing that as well. One of the things, and this is kind of the recurring topic of kind of where we are right now, everywhere, is around staffing and retaining of that expertise in the area of security especially is very challenging right now because everyone, no matter your industry, is struggling with this right now. And so professionals who are well versed in this are being able to essentially name their dollar amount for being able to hire these types of folks. I've seen salaries in this area increase on the order of 100 to 150% in the last 2 years. Talk about that type of growth around that. Some of that then also certainly thinking about the staffing we do have, and that shared workloads. We're all doing a lot of things, and how do we share that workload and making sure that that security piece is being covered. And so, of course, it's an ever-changing landscape, thinking about all of the different things that we're looking at from a security standpoint. We know ransomware is on the increase everywhere, no matter what what industry you're in. Another piece is just, besides this malware, like ransomware, is just what you'd call probably more annoying type applications that can be installed on computers, and they're not necessarily looking for data, but they cause problems, and then users start to try to fix that and can lead astray. With some of those being crypto miners, where they're trying to do some of the mining for those cryptocurrencies. Social engineering, phishing, and spearfishing. We've seen cases of this in the district where people are calling, trying to represent themselves as someone they're not, trying to get information. We've also seen this in email form of that, trying to represent usually someone of leadership in the district that they've gotten off of the website or in other avenues, and then are trying to use that person's name to talk someone into either giving them access to information or information directly, or asking them to purchase something on their behalf. So we've certainly seen this as well. Another piece which I'll mention, and that's from a Gartner survey, says that about 70% of the issues that happen in IT are actually mistakes caused by people in that. That's the numbers we know in the industry. And certainly one of those things we need to think about is, given the current state, both staff turnover and stress, and when we have the ability to get training and some of those gaps starting to happen, is mistakes happen. And so making sure that we're helping helping people understand that and make sure that we also have, from a systems perspective, a separation of duties piece so that it is no single point that can cause a data security issue. Another piece that's really changing and a challenge right now is around statutes. As far as you think about how fast statutes can change, right now they're changing really fast in this area in response to what's happening. Minnesota certainly has one of the more stringent reporting requirements from a data breach perspective in the nation right now. Also coming online in some states are looking to perhaps adopt the California Privacy Rights Act, which talks about how data is handled as well. And then even just this summer or this spring, an executive order from President Biden talking about improving nation's cybersecurity stance and some of the requirements perhaps coming with that around reporting to the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency, so CISA. So those are some of the challenges we certainly look at in training. You know, of course, training is always the when, how, where can we do it, what to make sure that's robust, and helping our staff with those decisions. So some of the things that Hopkins is looking at is our security posture. In the next slide here, we really talk about some of these pieces of how do we provide access to the data. So we follow the industry standard practice of principle of least privilege around data access, of who needs to have access with that. We're working with our data team. We know that they're continuing to build their capabilities in this area around a data dictionary to know what resources are available for staff. We've had a lot of conversations internally about what data do we have? Does everyone know what data we have so that they can use it to help our scholars as well? You know, that's always that kind of balance that we're looking for, is how do we simultaneously meet the needs of privacy of that information, along with really making sure that staff have the data necessary to best support our scholars. That's always a balance that we're working on. And the next slide, just some of the security methodology that we're working through, just so the board is aware on some of these pieces that we're doing, both through requirements and because we also know that it's the right thing to do to protect our student and staff data. In this area, Hopkins is also taking a consortium approach to this. We work with 7 other school districts in around the Twin Cities area here to really talk about best practices, the tools that we're using, how we review that information, and that's constantly reevaluating what we call our security posture, kind of how are we set up and watching for these pieces and mitigation ways as well. So we have a retainer with an IT security professional as part of that consortium, works with us on that monthly basis, but then is also available for incidents that might occur, as we did have a IT security related incident this past spring. Worked through that through our incident response playbook, working with the insurance company, who also then brought to bear a national cybersecurity firm as well as national legal counsel to make sure that we understood what we needed to do. Luckily, as we found out in that incident, there were no reporting requirements, as no data had actually left our network. But certainly both a test of our capabilities around both technical as well as our response, and making sure that we had everyone engaged in understanding what was happening there. Certainly we approach this at a layered methodology throughout our entire security posture. Director Chapanduka mentioned a new requirement from insurance side was multi-factor authentication for all staff this year for accessing email, also remote staff, anyone off campus, so to speak, is required multi-factor authentication to access any of our data that lives on premise here as well. Staff members that have a high level of access to data in our systems have required multi-factor authentication for a few years now at this point. And this year, that requirement rolled out to everyone. Some of those pieces, like hardware, like a next generation firewall, which the contract was approved by the board and partly funded through federal monies through the E-rate program, was approved this last spring and will be installed in this coming spring, as well as network access control, which is part of all of our network functions here on our campuses as well. What we refer to now as legacy endpoint protection, which is antivirus, as well as more advanced endpoint protection that we have been rolling out to all of our devices here over the last year, which some of that was renewed here just back in August, and we added on to that as well. So that, along with our disaster recovery plan and incident response playbook, as I mentioned before, gives you hopefully some insight of what we're looking at from a methods perspective, as well as our staffing and technical resources that we're bringing to bear around this. And so I believe the next slide we're handing back to Director Chapanduka.
Thank you, Director Weta, for that information. As I mentioned earlier on, we've seen increases in lawsuits to boards, as well as a lot of errors and omissions. So one of the things we did is to make sure that we have coverage for some of these areas which normally in certain circumstances they get overlooked. So we do have coverages for directors and officers. We have coverages for employment practices. We have coverages for errors and omissions. And we do make sure that we minimize any of these errors. We've seen increases in lawsuits in special education, so we do have coverages which actually protect the district in those instances. Can you go to the next slide, please? Other areas which, in normal circumstances get overlooked. So we do have coverages too in employee theft, forgery and alterations, inside premises theft of money and securities, robbery or safe burglary, outside premises coverages, computer fraud, fund transfer due to fraud, money orders and counterfeit money. So these are other areas in addition to just our general property and casualty areas of risk. And with that, we'll actually take any questions from board members. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Director Chapanduka and Director Wetter. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Chair Bouchard,
Director Adams.
what's been our loss history? Since we've been with this ALPS, it's been what, 4 years now? We've been with them. Have we incurred any losses? And what's our loss ratio? Do you know?
Thank you, Director Adams. So we've been with ALPS actually since 2014. So this is actually our eighth year. Honestly, comparing with other members which are in the group, I think our losses have kind of been minimal. We've had some normal wear and tear losses, which may happen, due to circumstances. I don't have the specifics to that information, since most of our claims are actually aggregated across the consortium. But I can get you some more details. We do get a detailed report, but I don't have it handy from a loss perspective. But we are not an outlier. we just have like minimal items which just kind of come, with our industry.
In what area were the losses? Has it been in liability or cyber losses? I'm just curious.
Sure. Mostly it's just in liability. I don't think we've had any cyber losses apart from what Mr. Waiter was explaining in regards to an incident which happened, which we're able to identify before any information was lost. So most of our losses are actually, for example, in property with transportation. Here and there we do have accidents,
Sure.
and then we do claim. And then if in the area of like workers' compensation, that's where we've had a bit of substantial losses in those specific areas.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for such a comprehensive presentation. I think it's certainly reassuring to me, and I think it will be reassuring to our community just to understand the multifaceted approach that we're taking to data privacy, security, and then our insurance protection as well. Director Wetter, I promise that I will never again grumble about the multi-factor identification after this presentation. So that's, one upside for me personally, having more of an idea of all of the intricacies that are happening behind the scenes to protect our data and the data of our families. It's really incredible work. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if you've got a problem with multi-factor authentication, it's the insurance company's fault, not John's.
I've never grumbled to John, just to myself, just for the record. Wonderful. Any last questions or comments for Director Chapman-Duca and Director Wetter? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to our final workshop agenda item. And this shouldn't take too long, but I did want to show you what I've been working on for our new board member onboarding. So there's a link to a draft in the packet of an onboarding document that has various sections of information that would be helpful to an incoming board member. But considering the last time I was an incoming board member, it was 4 years ago, I thought it would be good to get some of our newer board members' eyes on this to see if there's anything that's missing. And I, of course, am happy to add to any of the sections or to add a section itself. At the very bottom, there is a space for professional development resources. And I'm really viewing this as an evolving space. So as we continue to do our own professional development as board members, we can constantly be adding to this document different resources that we're finding that are helpful. Certainly not to overwhelm the new board members who will be welcoming, but just the fact that we're out there all the time looking for resources to help us better understand the intricacies of this work. To have all of those housed in one place will be helpful not only to new board members, but to us. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I'm always like, wait, where was that? Like today it was the common acronyms used in education.
Yes.
Steve, because you brought that up at the last workshop, and I'm like, where was it? Oh yeah, the MSBA website. And then I had to, back to cyber security, I had to change my password, and then I had to do like a multi-factor thing. So anyways, if I had just had it here on this document, I could have saved myself maybe 15 minutes today. So
Yeah,
anyways.
is there a website that has all those acronyms that we could just drop in at the end?
There is. There's like a document that MSBA created. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that's linked there now.
All right.
And you do get, or at least you used to get a hard copy of it when you do the leadership training, phase 1 and 2.
That's true.
Oh, really?
That's true.
Okay.
I have a recent one if you'd like to look at.
We also have a Hopkins one.
Oh.
Yeah, there used to be
I can find out
I
where that
got
is.
one
Right.
that
Yeah, let's add that.
Yeah, let me
someone
find
gave
it.
me. But, I remember being a new board member, that was the biggest challenge for me, was sorting through all these acronyms that people were using. And it was, in some of the meetings, I only understood about half of what was being said because I was lacking that information. But
Well, it's like learning a new language, right?
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Another thing that you might add is a link to Education Week. I found that to be a very valuable publication
Great.
to keep abreast of current issues in education.
Thank you. Any other ideas for things to add?
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director Cool.
Over the first month or so, as I was kind of onboarding, there was a list of kind of the unwritten rules or unwritten best practices that we can do as a board. That is always good to find a way to show that to someone maybe early so then they don't have to be told after they may make a small mistake. And I think that, I think the best way to say that is, the common courtesy we use as we respond to emails that come to the group versus if it comes to me personally. Or if I want to have a visit at the high school and have a tour because maybe I missed something. It's those type of things all in one place that I think would be a really nice, like a frequently not asked questions area.
So I have linked to, under community engagement, the board processes for communication guidelines. So all of that email piece, what to do if you hear a concern in the community, kind of what are the pathways. So that should all be contained in the board processes for communication. And this is something, a document that we can review at our workshop in January with our new board members, because it really is a culture piece, like you're saying. These are not rules that are contained in statute, right? Like these are cultural norms that we create as an organization. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to say that, the information in this document, this onboarding document, is things as they are now, but of course we have the opportunity to build and create, the culture that we will be as a board in January moving forward. So the processes for communication are there, and then I will add that information. You brought up a good point about visiting, like if you want to visit a school, kind of what are some of those protocols?
Or speak to a teacher.
Yeah.
Or any of those things. Or write a letter to the editor. Or make a public comment.
Yeah, so I have a piece of First Amendment considerations piece where I did, note that if a board member is quoted in the press or submits a letter to the editor, that their board title will likely be published with it. So is there any more detail you think I should add there?
Well, and I think too, a lot of this is covered when you go through the leadership training through MSBA Phase 1 and 2, which I highly recommend that all new board members do, preferably before starting in January. I found great value in that, so that at my first meeting, I knew what to expect and what would be expected of me. And so a lot of that is covered in that piece as well. So highly recommend that training.
I've already talked with our our new board members about it. Of course, we'll canvass the results of the election here shortly at the meeting, so everything will become official then. But I've talked to our board members-elect about the MSBA training, and so they have those dates on their calendars and are aware of that. Anything else that would be helpful to add into this document or to think about with onboarding generally? I can let you know that we'll be scheduling meetings for the new board members with Dr. Mary Piri Reed, with Director Chapanduka, with myself, and then Shannon has agreed to serve as a mentor for Jason Ross, and then Steve has agreed to serve as a mentor for Rachel Hartland, so they'll have their contact people.
You want me to be a mentor for you?
That would be great. Yeah, I mean, you know I need it, so.
I mean, I don't want you to feel like you don't get that same privilege.
I know you've been taking notes over the past 2 years, and I feel like they're all just gonna, this will be my time. No, I actually do want some mentorship. So, great. Anything else that I should be keeping in mind here?
I think it's a pretty good document.
Yeah, this is really good. Thank you for doing this.
No problem. It can also be something, that evolves over time, and I think it's just nice to have something that we can return to every 2 years and be like, oh, wait, we need to update it, or, this piece is different. So I hope it'll be useful. Great. Anything else before we take a very brief break before our meeting? Okay, well, let's close down our workshop. Thank you. We covered a lot, and I'll see you back at the table at 7 o'clock for our meeting. Have two options for giving public comment. One is to leave a voicemail. Instructions for how to do that and the number to call are contained in our board packet. The other option is to visit us in person and fill out a public comment card located in the back of the boardroom before the meeting and hand it to the board chair, which would be me, before the meeting begins. We did not receive any voicemails this evening, and we do not have anyone here to comment in person. So we'll move to our next agenda item, which is our reports. And we're so lucky to have two student board representatives with us tonight. Angel, are you on the Google Meet?
I am.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Did you have a report this evening?
Yeah, really quick. So it's the start of the second term. I know that a lot of students are getting situated with new classes and different opportunity hours. Recently, I've been made aware that there isn't much going on right now with committees. I've been in touch with a couple of other students, a part of the student board as well, who have yet to hear anything. Also, just with schooling in general, I know that so far so good with, in person again. I know a lot of students are feeling a lot more confident in the academics, being in person and being able to be more in touch with their peers and their teachers. I heard that the annual fall play is happening, and that should be taking place. Don't quote me on this, but I believe the first play takes place the 17th. So that's exciting to hear. And really just excited to be back. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Angel. It's great to hear your voice. Any questions for Angel? Well, thank you for being with us. Do we have any other student board reps on the Google Meet? All right, then we'll go to Grace Riley, who's here with us in person this evening.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. I have a quick update for everything to do with sports at Hopkins. Last week, all official fall sports have ended, and we're making the transition into winter sports. Most of them start either this week or next week, with a few, like gymnastics, I believe, starting in 2 weeks. And then just to wrap up fall sports, we had two dancers from Hopkins compete in the Miss Dance Team competition. Their names were Cameron McNeil and Jazara Hall, and Cameron placed 13th overall and Jazara placed 9th. And Miss Dance Team, for those of you that don't know, is a competition for individual high school dance team members. And they go and they participate statewide in individual solos, which are choreographed by the dancer and their dance coach. So some really exciting stuff there. And then for start times, I know we talked about it in our meeting earlier today, but I've reached out to a couple students, and more specifically, students of minorities and single income household students. And just to kind of relate it all back to start times, their general consensus is that they're worried about how they're going to be able to get to school. Relating it to myself, I live in a single income family, and other than like rides from friends or getting on the bus, I'm not able to get to school. So there's a big concern with some of those people about the starting earlier versus later and the change that'll happen with that. And then as well as starting later means ending later. And that's a big concern for some of our students that take AP classes with the expected 1.5 to 2 hours of homework per class per night, as well as some of our juniors and seniors who are doing PSEO. That's been a struggle for them to think over how they're going to align their schedules and if they're able to align their schedules with some of the classes they're taking. And then as well as students with jobs, I know for my job personally, I can't start work later than 5 o'clock. And I've spoken to, like I said, other students about this as well, and they feel that in order to continue their job, there would be a sort of a scheduling conflict if we were to end school at, say, I don't know what time you guys were thinking necessarily, but they were worried that they wouldn't have enough time to do their job and do their homework and really balance it all. And when asked kind of like what they thought would be a way that that could all happen, they said something similar to the Friday schedule, so they could still get here on time and then maybe still leave at that same time, which I know is not typically ideal. But they feel that if we could kind of implement some things like that with the earlier start times and keeping that same schedule, that would be really beneficial to them. And that's all I have for you guys.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Grace?
Thank you for doing that work.
Of course.
That's great.
Angel, are you still there on the Google Meet?
Yes.
Oh, good. What are your thoughts around changing the start time to later for junior high and high school?
Honestly, I kind of agree with her, actually, yeah. Because I know I can heavily relate to, having like one current ride to and from, because I live in Brooklyn Center, so I'm pretty far out from school already, and I usually work on like at 5 or after 5, depending on when I get home. So it can definitely be a struggle, especially with commute times. And I know the winter coming up, that is also going to be a big concern because it gets a lot harder to travel from place to place in the cold, especially with Minnesota being known for its infamous winters. So yes.
Don't remind us, Angel. We might be heading into it at the end of this week, at least a little sampling, so.
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, thank you. This is all such important food for thought. And as you continue to engage with your colleagues at the high school, please let us know what themes are emerging. It's really helpful for us as we take into consideration the pretty complex decisions that we're going to have to make on the 23rd. So appreciate it. Wonderful. Well, with that, we'll move to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. So always lots happening in Hopkins, and sometimes it's a small task to just identify a short list of items to share because the list of wonderful things happening is very lengthy. But you can see these cute kiddos that we sometimes refer to as scholars who are very happy to be learning outside, and it's wonderful to have our outdoor immersion experiences for our students to benefit from. A couple of district highlights, as our school board members know, but perhaps community members listening in hopefully are delighted to hear that our incumbent candidate, Jen Bouchard, and 2 additional candidates running for school board, Rachel Hartland and Jason Ross, were the top 3 individuals who received the highest votes and will begin their 4-year term being sworn in January. So on behalf of the Hopkins School District, staff, students, stakeholders, I personally am very excited, and I know that there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm around these 3 individuals. So congratulations to these leaders, and we really look forward to continuing to work with you, Chair Bouchard, and we look forward to working with Rachel and Jason as well. I wanted to share that last evening I had the opportunity to serve on a in a panel conversation that was live streamed via Facebook with our Hennepin County Commissioner, Chris Latondras, who is a former Hopkins School Board member, along with Congressman Dean Phillips, Wayzata Mayor Johanna Mountain, and we talked about the American Rescue Plan funds and other federal funds that have been allocated to state and local governments, school districts to address the needs brought on by COVID. So it was a very rich and also short discussion, just 1 hour long. We each got to present how we have used federal dollars. I talked about how the myriad of ways that we've used our federal funding to support students and families during this time, and also identified some things that we need to continue thinking about, such as expanding mental health support for students and for staff, and thinking about our homeless and highly mobile families and the unique support that they will continue to need. School spotlight. I wanted to put a spotlight on our Hopkins athletes. You know, there are so many wonderful athletes, too many to mention here, but these are students who are not only devoting a ton of their time engaging in rigorous academics, but they're contributing many, many hours every week during 1, 2, 3 seasons of sports. And so currently we have hundreds of student athletes and their parents and caregivers attending a chemical awareness and mental health meeting. It's literally taking place as we speak in the high school space. Our Hopkins girls cross country team placed 7th at the state meet. Recently, we have 10 seniors who are signing national letters of intent tomorrow, and that's always very exciting news. And then, of course, winter sports has begun with dance and hockey, gymnastics, basketball, skiing, wrestling, boys swim and dive. So much to go to for any of us who like to have multiple activities per week. Lots of scholar athletes to support. And I love this picture. Look at how look at how happy they look with the little markings, the rainbow markings under their eyes. That's really cute. Okay, and then our department spotlight. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to meet Jessica Glidden. She is so wonderful. She was also spotlighted in our Hopkins update that gets mailed to our community members. So she's a really wonderful addition to our district staff. She is serving as the American Indian Cultural Liaison and Program Lead. She's really well connected to our American Indian scholars, to their families. She has a warm presence. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she's very, very in tune with her own cultural Native heritage. So she, in the newsletter, she talks about what excites her about Vision 2031. She loves the core value that aligns with her Ojibwe values, specifically humility of heart. And she is enjoying passing on teachings to scholars to just prepare that next generation of learners and citizens and leaders. So I personally just love Jessica, and she has really blessed us with so much support and service. I always try to have a system goal focus. I wanted to let our board and community members know that all leaders have either turned in their goals, which were due on November 1st, are in the process of turning those in. And then for this evening's focus, in accordance with a quote that I find very powerful, excellence without equity is not excellence. And I saw this in the findings that we reviewed today with members of the Symmetry Systems Unlimited team, which is our partner organization that conducted our district-wide equity audit. So it took more than a year to complete this very small team of extremely devoted and experienced educators because, COVID completely interrupted the process. But they provided a very thick book with all of their research and findings, and organized it in a way that will be easy for us to review and then identify next steps. So we will be reviewing that as cabinet and school leaders, reviewing the data, and we'll also be scheduling a presentation for all of you. And then finally, I do want to end with a wonderful video that was put together by Kevin Noonan, who is an exemplary member of our communications and marketing team. We love Kevin's videos. We needed a video to include in our presentation to teacher candidates of color at a recent U of M recruiting event. So this was held on Friday, October 29, and a couple of us went over to the U and spent about 2 hours with approximately 25 teacher candidates. And, really our goal and our teachers of color, our teacher candidates of color will have significant choice in where they serve, where they land. And so, we were just working our darndest to have them see Hopkins as a perfect possibility for where they might land. And as you know, one of our success indicators for Vision 2031 is that our staff and student demographics will match. So we have a lot of work to do to increase the number of teachers of color who serve here in Hopkins. I'm going to end with this video. Oh gosh, I don't know, is that it? Maybe it is, okay. Hopefully it is.
Hopkins is unique. It's unique because of its people.
I feel like I'm part of an inclusive community, and everyone's goal here is to help all their students reach their full potential, and I just love being a part of that.
It's been great. I felt really welcomed by established teachers. 2020, that's when I was hired, second year of the pandemic. So it was a challenging time to come into a new school district, so all that support really made a big difference.
I have been teaching in Hopkins for 14 years. All the colleagues, we are very cooperative and help each other. The new teachers can always get help whatever they need.
We have a staff that they're free to speak. They can be authentic. They can ask questions, those critical questions that really are going to make a difference in our world.
You can chart your path here, and it doesn't mean you'll be alone on that path. There'll be people with you, but you'll also get to see so many different other ways of navigating the world because of who you're with.
Our whole community is very much like what the world looks like.
And I can talk from experience coming from a school where 90% of the student body was from one cultural background. One of the first things that I thought when I came to visit was, I feel like out there in society.
The real world is a very diverse one, and Hopkins is that. And it wasn't always that way, but has become quite a place of diverse perspectives, experiences, languages, races.
I think it's crucial for scholars to see themselves in their educators. It fosters a sense of belonging, and when students feel like they belong, they do better academically and they do better socially.
So I talked to some of my scholars that I work with, and that's one of the main things that they say is we appreciate seeing more people who look like us in the building. Somebody who can stand in for me if I need it, but also that role model.
When I was getting my room together, two sisters were walking out in the hallway. One peeked in my room. I could hear her whisper to her father, "I never had a Black teacher before." Being my first year, I kind of got tears in my eyes because it made me realize that I have an opportunity for children to see themselves in me.
The way school has worked for the last century has not serviced all of our scholars. We need to actively and unapologetically disrupt those systems that create those discrepancies.
That takes equity training, that takes anti-racist training, that takes a restorative culture.
We've been doing the work, and we have a team full of administrators that are committed to doing the work. I've seen in my 3 years being here that work being done. I'm very satisfied with our staff and our community as a whole, and I only see us getting better.
Sometimes my language is different, my delivery is different, and I think that is a benefit, not only for our brown students, but for all students.
With staff comes programming, comes new ideas, fresh ideas.
Our school is sort of like a potluck. We want everybody to bring something to share.
This just feels right. We're a diverse community that cares deeply about one another. We are a family.
I have never worked in a district that in its values has the word love in it. That may come across to some as, oh, they're just saying that. But I assure you, this is something that our teachers live and model every single day. So joining this school district, a school district that is courageous and has equity at the forefront of everything it does, we have an opportunity now to change the status quo and really do what's best for our scholars.
I would have worked there.
No, I want to be
A
part of
great
that.
video.
Great. It was really inspiring. It was wonderful. Any questions or comments for Dr. Mary Perry Reed?
Thank you for doing that and representing Hopkins and
Yeah.
working hard to bring great people here. Appreciate it.
It's the whole team. Thank you.
I watched the live stream discussion about the American Rescue Plan allocations last night, and just, I'm constantly impressed by Dr. Mary Perry Reed, but especially in that context last night, she, really had an explicitly anti-racist approach to how she was describing our allocations and the work that we've been doing here in Hopkins, and our approach on mental health and social emotional wellness, and really supporting all of our families through it, and just gave really specific examples of the important work that we've been doing here in the district, and just was a real shining star on that panel last night. So thank you for representing Hopkins.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll go to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. As is customary, the first report of the Treasurer's report of the month, we report on enrollment. And for November, we had 9 additional students since October 1st. Mostly at North Junior High, where there were 7 new students there. So at this point, we're 208 students over our revised projection for this year, and 274 over our original projection. So quite an increase that we're experiencing, and pleasantly surprised, and we welcome those new students. In terms of expenses, expenses of note include, speaking of social emotional learning, $26,076 for something called a Second Step. It's a three-year license for K through 8 social emotional learning software. So we'll be implementing that, or if we haven't done that already. We paid $98.51 for our annual IB, International Baccalaureate fee. We're wrapping up expenses for the ventilation project that we did at the high school over the summer. Paid $76,000 to wrap that up. One of the things that the district does that some parents aren't aware of is that we provide band instruments for some kids, for certain instruments. And we just purchased about $7,800 worth of new instruments. I don't know which schools they went to, but there are new band instruments that are going to be at use for our students within the district. $250 to the Roseville School District for a robotics tournament that's coming up. And $22,475 for the University of Minnesota tuition for the fall semester. A lot of people don't realize that we do support secondary educational options, SEO, and many of our high school students take the opportunity to attend the University of Minnesota, and we pay the tuition. So that's $22,475 that parents do not have to spend for college tuition. So it's a great opportunity. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $3,558,136.87 for the period October 19, 2021 through November 2nd, 2021.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Treasurer Adams. Next, we'll move on to new business, and our first agenda item is policies and first read. I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. I'd like to invite Assistant Superintendent Nick Lightfoot to the table to help us discuss the list of policies that you have before us tonight. We discussed them each at our Policy and Monitoring Committee meeting, and we'll turn it over to Nick for details.
Greetings, good evening. You have the packet of information that has been distributed, and you'll see the list of policies there. I'll go through those for you this evening. We'll start with 401, which is the equal employment opportunity. There were some suggested changes mirroring the work that was done in our equal educational opportunity work with Policy 102, and you'll see that reflected in 2A to make sure that we are being mindful of how we are looking at being consistent with our policy language as we look at statements in policy to be inclusive. So you'll see that element. You will also see in the regulations that we have made appropriate changes there as well to highlight our inclusivity. As well, you will see the model MSBA that we worked off of in doing the work with 401. So with that, any specific comments, questions, anything that I can be helpful with in addressing related to Policy 401?
I appreciate how specific you were
Yeah.
in the wording changes. It truly is much more inclusive, so thank you to the committee. Any other questions or comments? I think we can move forward.
Great, thank you. Next one, Policy 404, employment background checks. As you will note, no specific changes here, just a review by the monitoring committee of this as well as the MSBA. So you'll see in this, nothing in addition to speak to any change, but would offer the opportunity for any questions or comments related to 404.
I think we can keep moving.
Great. 406, related to 406, there were some specific changes that were made with the revised model policy. There was some specific work done with the Minnesota School Board Association to reflect changes in statute. You will note that there has also been some general revision with 406. All of that's included, and we did go through those items and those elements in 406 to keep that information consistent with the new recommendations. Are there any questions or comments related to 406 that I might be able to address at this time?
The information shared during our workshop discussion gives even more robust context to this policy now. So, so that was a well-curated discussion, and I'm going to give credit to Vice Chair Andreessen and Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot on that.
And also Director Kuhl, who asked the question that initiated the discussion.
Thank you, Director Kuhl.
Additional comments, questions on 406?
I think we can move ahead.
All right. 413, again, 413 is reflective of our work in mirroring policy 102. You will also hopefully see that mirror in 401 with our equal employment as well. When we are looking at harassment and violence, we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive of as well. Status as we look at definition of protected class, as you will see noted throughout the change in policy. As well, Minnesota School Boards Association did initial work of their revisions for 2021. We have modified those slightly to make sure our language is the language that's driving the definitions of protected class within the policy, so you will see that being more inclusive given the work that we've done over time. So that is also written into 413. There are specific questions. I am more than happy to address those within 413.
Just structurally, I like how you do the definition work up front and then including protected class throughout. It makes it much more readable and streamlined, yet still has the impact that we would want this policy to have. So thank you for those changes.
You're very welcome. Anything else related to this?
I think we're good.
Okay. Then lastly, 456 is our staff ethics conflict of interest policy. We added a little bit of a change in 6 to make sure that we also included instructional data and intellectual property. But that was really the only specific modification that we made to 456. Would entertain any questions that are there related to 456 as well.
And it looks like we are good on that one as well. Thank you very much, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. Thank you.
Quick thing I noticed, Dr. Lightfoot, and I do want to make sure that the board is aware that we have been absolutely honored to have a student on the policy committee.
Yay!
Yes, so Parker has joined us, and they have been integral in really making sure that we're reading through these with our equity lens in place. And I did notice, Dr. Lightfoot, that I think this last one, 456, still had some he or she's that we were looking to replace with theys in all of our policies. So I noticed that towards the end of this one, that this one hadn't been updated with some of that.
Thank you. We will update that. I believe we updated 413. That was the other one where we noted the need for that as well. But we will go back and double check that. Thank you, Director Peterson.
Yep.
We will do that.
So.
Sure. Thank you very much, Director Peterson, and thank you to Parker for their hard work on the policy committee. that's so great. I'm so glad that they're part of that.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Their input is robust and which is unexpected and fantastic. So it makes our meetings way more fun too. So
that's great. Now I'm even more jealous of policy. You all know how I feel about policy. I'm going to get back on policy during this term. Dr. Mary Prairie-Reed had a question.
Dr. Lightfoot, back to policy 404. We've had a lot of questions from principals and other leaders around background checks for volunteers. So with this just need for extra adults in our schools, what is the policy that we need to pay attention to make sure that that we can welcome parent volunteers who have been vetted?
Yep. Great question. This one is employment background checks. So when we have an employment issue, like someone who we are working with that employment relationship, that is specific to this. Under our volunteers policy, when we do have parent volunteers that would be working directly with young people, we do have that requirement that they go through a background check to make sure that if they are working alone and have the possibility to be unsupervised with a student, that we do take that high level of review when we have that. We do cover for those background checks because we want to recognize that someone is offering their volunteer service for us. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we've done our diligence.
So there's a separate volunteer policy. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I would look for a motion that the board approve the above policies in first read and that the board direct the administration to prepare the policies with suggested revisions for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to approve the policies with suggested revisions. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Assistant
Thank you.
Superintendent Lightfoot. Next, we'll move on to our updated MSBA resolutions. They're back. The resolutions are back, and I will turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen.
I never left. As some of you may be aware, we submitted the resolutions that we approved on October 5th and got feedback during discussions with MSBA about how we could maybe make one of them more effective. So you will see that there is, what I'm bringing before you tonight is a proposed language change to the fully fund school nutrition programs resolution that we passed. So I will read you the new language of the resolution. Part of this is informational in nature and allow you to ask any questions you might have about that change. So it is, the new language is, therefore be it resolved that Hopkins School Board urges the legislature to move toward fully funding public school nutrition programs so all Minnesota families have equitable access to healthy meals, contributing to overall community health and food security.
So we will eventually need to do a roll call vote on this. I think it makes sense right now to ask any questions you have of Vice Chair Andreessen before we vote on this updated resolution.
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director Cole.
Director Andreessen, is there any of this language that you're concerned with, or do you feel comfortable with all the suggested additions?
I am not concerned with any of the new language.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure. Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Vice Chair Andreessen, I was just wondering if we partnered with the Director of Nutrition Services on this? I'm sorry if I missed that.
I have spoken with Director Makura on this issue as I've been going through the process,
Okay.
including last year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Chair Bouchard,
Yes, Director Adams.
I'll just make a comment here. And I've already discussed this with Director Andreessen. I feel like MSBA wanted us to kind of water down this resolution. I was not real happy with the fact that they're trying to be more tentative. I think this is going to be a real issue when we go off the summer meal program starting next fall. And I'd like to be, I wish it were a little more strident, I guess, in trying to get the attention of the legislature to deal with this issue. But anyway, that's just an editorial comment on my part. Certainly, I'm in agreement that we can do, if we can do anything to make free meals available to students and families, we ought to do it. So I just wish the same urgency was afoot over at the legislature.
Is part of the political context too that, and I don't mean to speak for MSBA or their staff, but it's something that's in my mind that we're not quite sure what's happening at the federal level, if meals will be extended, if we will move toward fully funded school meals for all, which I would like to urge the federal government to act on sooner rather than later. But I'm wondering if part of the the reason behind the suggested change is there is some gray area here, and we would not perhaps want to urge the Minnesota legislature to fully fund the meals if there is something coming from the federal government.
Right.
All that to say, let's feed kids and let's do it yesterday, right? So the urgency remains. It's more a fact of like, where is the funding going to come from, and who has the political will and courage to make it happen?
Yep, yeah. Well, I look forward to the discussion that we have at the Delegate Assembly over this resolution. It was pretty robust last year. I expect it to be the same this year. So,
We'll be anxiously awaiting the summary.
yeah.
So with that, I would look for a motion that the board approve the presented resolution for the MSBA Delegate Assembly.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the presented resolution for the MSBA Delegate Assembly. Clerk Peterson.
Ooh, awesome, thank you. Director Cool?
Aye.
Director Peterson, aye. Director Adams?
Aye.
Chair Bouchard?
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen?
Aye.
Director Khan?
Aye.
Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Vice Chair Andreessen, for your work on this. I mean, this has been over a year in the making.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yeah.
2 years in the making?
Yeah.
And certainly your research started before that point. And so thank you for keeping this front and center. I know we have support from other school board members and other districts as well.
We do, yeah. There is one more resolution.
Oh, that's right. I apologize. We've got more work to do before we can.
That's right.
We can chit-chat.
One more roll
Okay,
call.
here we go.
And so part of the adaptations to the resolution that we passed on October 5th was pulling out the compensatory funding piece. So you might remember it as a section that started with the title, No More Applications. And so the reasoning behind pulling that out of the resolution was that there seems to be a lot of appetite and political will to get this through the legislature this session. And so while the reasoning, the rationale behind it is identical, it's now its own separate resolution. So I will go ahead and read that language. Therefore, be it resolved that Hopkins Public Schools urges the legislature to move away from free and reduced price lunch as a primary factor in computing compensatory revenue, replacing it with a model that more accurately reflects community need. Does anyone have any questions about that resolution?
Vice Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Do you feel like peeling this segment out, and this is more your kind of gut reaction, do you feel like it then sort of dilutes the ability of one or the other to be effective?
No, I definitely see that this issue needs to be taken care of actually before we can move forward with fully funding school meals.
Okay.
One of the things that I think that we find when we start digging into it is that this is perhaps what might be called an unintended consequence of providing meals to families, is that we get less of those applications completed. Again, I don't think families should have to complete an application in order to get an educational benefit, but that's where we're at. And so in order to hold school districts whole and not lose a bunch of funding that we rely upon, we need to find a different measurement and metric in order to continue to fund schools through the compensatory funding model if we can't use those applications.
Cool.
Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So since this is a policy year at the legislature, the idea is that this could be moved through quite easily. And so it's an incremental step in getting us to universal school meals.
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director
I'll
Adams.
just share with you that I took this issue up with the superintendent of the Monaga School District, who's also been very vocal about providing free meals for kids. And he is totally in support of this and would offer their support at the delegate assembly. But he says we got to do it this year because he's retiring at the end of this year. So he wants this as part of his legacy. So we've got to work extra hard at the legislature this session.
Let's get it done for Monaga, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm already
A higher
having
immigrant
conversations
population?
with some legislators,
What's that?
so.
Does he have a higher immigrant population?
Not an immigrant population, but there's a religious sect in his district that has very large families
Oh, I see.
and low income. And so the school is the source of nutrition for a lot of those families up there. So.
Context is everything.
I'm sorry?
Where are they located?
Monaga is about 10 miles south of Park Rapids on Highway 71. I've been there.
Of course you have.
The home of Saint Urho.
Ervil?
Urho,
Oh,
U-R-H-O.
oh, wow.
It's a made-up saint. They just wanted to celebrate something the day before St. Patty's Day. So,
I gotta check this place out.
Gateway to the Pines.
I'm learning a lot tonight.
Were there any other questions or further discussion about this resolution?
With that, I would look for a motion that the board approve the second presented resolution for the MSBA Delegate Assembly.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the second presented resolution for the MSBA Delegate Assembly. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Thank you. Director Khan.
I thought you were going to go.
I know.
Sorry, that surprised me. Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Chair Bouchard.
Aye.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. Director Cool.
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to agenda item C. We will canvass the election results, and I'll welcome Director Chapanduka to the virtual part of the hybrid table. That's a thing, right?
Well, thank you, Chair Bouchard. First of all, I want to thank all the community members who participated in the elections and all the candidates for the sacrifice. And congratulations to the 3 upcoming board members for the elections. According to Minnesota Statute 126C.17, Subdivision 9, between the 3rd and the 10th day of a school district election, the board shall canvass and declare the results of the election. The school board election was held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, to fill the expiring terms of directors Jen Bouchard, John Poole, and Fatim Ahmad. The recommendation is for the board to approve the results of the school board election conducted on November 2nd, 2021, by adopting the proposed resolution canvassing results of the elections. A total of 21,517 voters of the district voted at the election of 3 school board members for a 4-year term on the board. Jen W. Bouchard, 6,026 votes. Jason Ross, 5,371 votes. Rachel Hartland, 5,371 votes. David Larson, 2,804 votes. Sarah Vey, 1,673 votes. And there were 272 write-ins. So the recommendation is for the board to approve the canvassing of the election and declare Jen W. Bouchard, Jason Ross, and Rachel Hartland as duly elected board members for a term of 4 years, starting the first month of January 2022.
Thank you very much, Director Chapanduka, and thank you for reading the resolutions so that I didn't have to talk about myself in the third person. So I would look for a motion that the board approve the results of the school board election conducted on November 2nd, 2021 by adopting the proposed resolution canvassing returns of votes of the school district general election.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Excellent. Director Adams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Chair Bouchard.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye.
6 ayes and 0 nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Clerk Peterson, for always keeping it interesting. And to Jason Ross and Rachel Hartland, if you're watching, this makes it official, and we are so thrilled to welcome you to the Hopkins School Board to engage in our collective work. Thank you, Director Chapanduka. Next, we'll move to our board member reports. Who would like to go first?
Well, I've got a very short one.
I heard the pen tap. I
Yep.
figured you were warming up.
LAC continues to meet. I was not able to meet with them last Friday, but I did on October 29th, and we're working at putting together a platform for the coming legislative session. On November 2nd, the election day, I voted and got to attend 2 election parties, one for our school board members, new school board members, and one for councilperson Deb Calvert for the council of Minnetonka. On November 5th, last Friday, I attended AMSD in person for the first time in 18 months and heard a presentation by Dr. Todd Beach, who chaired the Social Studies Standards Review Committee. And it was a very interesting presentation about the things that they considered, the things they discussed before coming up with the new social studies standards, which will not be implemented for 5 years, but at least the work is moving forward. And they never met in person. That was kind of interesting. Everybody met via Zoom or some similar distance communication. We also awarded the Friend of Education Award to Paula Forbes at that meeting. Paula is just a wonderful consultant that we've used here in the district before. And besides being a very talented consultant, she's just a great person. And she gave a very superb acceptance speech, and very deserving. She got the award primarily for the work that she did for Reimagine Minnesota, which is all about things that we can do to eliminate the so-called achievement gap in school districts across the state. And it ended up being 9 principles that they recommend that every school district adopt. And anyone that hasn't seen that ought to read it, I think, because it's prescriptive about things that school districts can be doing to make sure that every kid gets an adequate education and a quality education. And then we approved the AMSD legislative platform in 5 position papers in the same meeting. But it was great to get together with some of the people I hadn't seen in 18 months. So that was fun.
Thank you, Director Adams.
Chair Bouchard, I have a quick one.
Director Khan.
I got to meet with Somali families in our outreach program, and it was led by Chantel Burgess, Alex Fisher, and Nasra Abdullahi. It was a very nice meeting. Families were able to openly express what their needs are, and actually, I was very surprised that we can host a job fair for them. So I wasn't aware of that, but that's so wonderful that our school takes that extra effort to, really help out families. And one of the things that came up in the meeting was that there are a lot of students that parents are concerned about because they're falling behind. And their request is to have some kind of tutoring sessions in possibly each of the individual schools that we have. And yeah, that was it.
Thank you, Director Khan. So was the job fair, is that the event that's happening on November 20th that's being organized through Community Ed?
I did not get the date.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so I know that there's one coming up here on November 20th at Eisenhower from 10 to 1. And of course, all community members are invited to that. So thank you very much.
My turn.
Yeah.
You're like, just go. Yes, so Election Day was great. I served as an election judge and got to see some of our former student board reps showing up to vote and bringing others to vote, which I was incredibly thrilled to see. And very, very grateful for those who chose to put themselves up for election to serve our community, but in particular, the Hopkins School Board, and just very, very thrilled that we had a good turnout and that people voted, and we have some new colleagues to welcome. And Chair Bouchard will be with us for another 4 years, so very excited about that. I was also really excited this weekend to attend the American Indian Round Dance celebration that was held at North Junior High. It was a powerful event. It started off with competitive singing and drumming, and there were a lot of competitors in it. Even, I think, the youngest person competing looked to be around 6 or 7, and that involved drumming as well as singing. And then they moved into the round dancing, and everyone was invited to be part of that celebration. The American Indian Movement hosted the event and provided most of the resources needed to have such a large event at our school, and the Indian Health Board was there with lots of information and a table. A meal was served, and attendance was, I thought, pretty good. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful to Jessica Glidden for bringing something like that to our community. It was, again, a very powerful and moving experience. I have never been to a round dance celebration before, so it was really powerful. And then I also got to go to the Mentoring the Mentor webinar through Msba, and the day after I agreed to be a mentor. So I was like, oh, how fortuitous. And so one of the things that they mentioned as being part of that is attending along with your mentee the phase 1 and 2 training workshop. So looking into that, because they mentioned one of the things that Director Cool, you brought up, that they can say a lot of things in general, but then if you're there as the mentor, you can say, well, in Hopkins, we do X, Y, and Z. So it was informative. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
Chair Bouchard, I've got one addendum to my report.
No, you already went.
All right. Go ahead. I just wanted to point out that besides school board races, elections on November 2nd, there were 65 school districts in Minnesota that had operating levies on their ballot. And this time around, 75% of them passed. That compares to, like, I think it was 51% in the last election passed. So it was a great day of support shown for school districts across the state. That's all.
No, that was a very important addendum, so I'm glad that you that you added it. Okay, well, for my board member report, I just have a message of thank you. So thank you for reelecting me to the Hopkins School Board and for your continued trust in my leadership. As a community, we've been through a complex and difficult, edifying and transformative journey together over the past 4 years, especially as we've navigated the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and the ongoing impacts of systemic racism and oppression in our nation and right here in our community. As an educator and a school board member, being part of a team creating innovative and deeply humanizing learning experiences, empowering students, eradicating entrenched disparities, and making structural changes to better serve our community is really what I figured out. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and it is my why. So to be able to do this work in the community where I was raised, in partnership with all of you, has truly been the honor of a lifetime. And I ran again because I know that we have so much more work to do, and I have so much more to learn about how to do it right here in this time and place. I'm grateful every day for the opportunity to serve alongside these dedicated and insightful board colleagues who are also pretty fun, our phenomenal superintendent and staff here in Hopkins. And I am really beyond excited to welcome Jason Ross and Rachel Hartland into this collective work and to build a board culture with them. So my deepest thanks. And with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:04 p.m.
Thank you, Nick.